I posted this in the announcement for week 5, but I also wanted to make a short video talking about the outline assignment. So here's what to include. You should write your introduction. Now, a common strategy that writers use and that I often encourage writers to use when I teach, for example, English composition, is to write your introduction last. But what you're doing here is you're writing a draft of your introduction. What do you think it will look like? I wouldn't necessarily expect this to be the exact introduction you use in your final essay. The key thing to include in it, though, is what your thesis statement is going to be. You do not need to underline your thesis statement. In fact, please don't. Remember that a thesis is essentially an argument that you are trying to prove. An argument that about something because of reasons X, Y, and Z. You need to include a detailed breakdown of the body of the paper. This is what most people think of when they think of an outline, I think. But here it's a little more detailed because you are going to include a sentence or two introducing your key topics or subtopics, sub-themes in the paper. I am flexible with these sub-themes. I know we say you want 3, and 3 is just kind of the magic number for academic persuasive writing. Commonly, a thesis will have 3 components. Again, like I said, because of X, Y, and Z. I've encouraged some of you in feedback to narrow your paper's focus because it's just simply too broad. And so your subtopics are going to look very different from one another depending on what your overall topic is of your paper. And so some people's subtopics might be someone else's main topic that they then choose to break down into other subtopics. You want to include your key arguments. Again, remember, essentially all academic writing is argumentative or persuasive. You are trying to convince your reader of a couple of things. You're trying to convince them that you know what you're talking about, that you are a growing expert on the subject, and that what you say is correct and accurate, including what you're trying to convince them of. You should also include the supporting evidence you plan to use from sources, as well as quotes. This doesn't need to be necessarily extensive. I'm fine if you say, oh, I found this letter from Sally Jackson, and Sally Jackson talked about blah, 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 and so I'm going to use this letter here. And you can just say Sally Jackson letter. I'm fine with that. But again, the more detail you actually put in this, the easier your paper is going to be to write, which is the reason I think they're making you do this. And then you need your bibliography formatted correctly in Turabian style. This is not an annotated bibliography. It's just a regular bibliography. So you're going to have hanging indents. It's going to be alphabetized by last name first. Turabian actually wants you to have primary sources and secondary sources separated. So it's going to look something like this. So this is an example from one of the chapters, draft chapters of my dissertation. The word bibliography bolded at the top, and then underneath that, primary sources not bolded. And then your primary sources, obviously I'm using more in my dissertation than you have to use, and then your secondary sources not bolded, and then your secondary sources listed in alphabetical order by the name of the author. So that's what I mean when I say Turabian wants you to have primary sources listed and then secondary sources listed. If you don't do that, I'm not going to be upset or anything, but it's a good habit to get into, I think. Other things for the bibliography, remember that for bibliographies, for the first listed author, their last name is first, so Smith, Sally. Only do that for standard names if the author is an organization like the Bureau of Indian Affairs. You are not going to put Affairs, Bureau of Indian. You're going to put Bureau of Indian Affairs. If it's a traditional Indian name like Black Hawk, you're just going to put Black Hawk, not Hawk, Black. Remember to italicize titles of books, even if it's a book that you are finding online somewhere, like from Project Gutenberg. Put other titles, like titles of articles, in quotation marks. Remember that you can't always trust the formatting that you see when you go to the library website or another site, you find a source and it says, oh, here's how to cite it in Chicago format. That's often incorrect, at least slightly. And again, Chicago and Turabian are the same thing. Why are they having you do this? This is a long paper, relatively speaking. It's using multiple sources. The detailed outline is going to help make your final draft much easier to write. The more detailed the outline is, also, the better my feedback can be. So if you turn in kind of a half-hearted outline, I'm not really going to give you much feedback. And maybe you're okay with that, and that's fine. The outline does not have a rubric attached to it. It is designed to be graded on a pass-fail basis. And so what I'm essentially looking for is that you have made a good faith effort to include the components that you've been asked to include. So I'm not going to be super picky with that. In other words, if your bibliography is not completely in Turabian format, that doesn't mean it's a fail. But the idea is you made a good faith effort. Now, if you turn in an outline that doesn't have a bibliography, that doesn't have an introduction, that is, half a page long, that is not acceptable. So what I expect to see is essentially a good faith effort. Again, the more detail that you put into this, I think the easier your paper will be to write. And I also think the more valid feedback that I provide you will be. If you have questions, please let me know. I wish you every success as you continue writing. And finally, one last reminder. If you are for some reason retaking this course, if you have taken this course before, you may not resubmit assignments. So if you took this course last year and you didn't get the grade you wanted, so you're retaking it, and you wrote last year about, I don't know, the trade in the fur trade in Yukon Territory, you don't write the same paper this time. SNHU does not allow you to resubmit your own work. Don't do that. That is considered academic dishonesty. I have to fill out paperwork. You get a bad grade. Nobody is happy. Similarly, if you're taking another history course this term, please don't submit the same assignment in more than one course. And I would make sure it's a really different assignment. So again, if in this course you are writing about the fur trade of the Yukon Territory, do not write about the fur trade in Yukon Territory. In another course, even if you're talking about it in the 1800s in this course and in the 1900s in the other one, make sure your papers are about clearly different topics so they don't get flagged. If you have questions about that, please let me know. Again, do not resubmit work if you ever retake a class at SNHU. Thanks.